All right, we're back. It's COMP228, and it's week 6, lesson 6, part 3 in our broadcast for Java programming here at Centennial. And where we last left off, we were kind of exploring different the IDE, the Eclipse IDE, and how to IDE. I got most of you to install Window Builder, right, which is the tool we can use to explore. What I'd like to do now is go through the PowerPoint presentation to make sure that we've kind of hit all of our high points. And I've uploaded the PowerPoint presentation still. If I on eCentennial, right, under week 6, the PowerPoint PDF in PDF form is 17.9 megs, so it's quite big. I told you it's like 180 or something like 180 slides. Now some of the slides we've covered, so we don't have to go through that. And that's what I do when I do my demos, right? We cover some of the slides. We just don't go through the PowerPoints when you do that. But key points, because the stuff I'm going to cover today, I'm going to test you on next week, right? Remember, next week we have an exam. I'm going to let you guys know which day it's going to be, or which time of the day, and if I'm going to do both things, I'm going to send out a notification. For now, I want you to assume that your exam is going to be in the, so that means like in the in the morning at 10:30, from 10:30 to 12:30. That's going to be your exam. It might be a two-part, like another exam piece that we're going to do in the afternoon, like now, between 6:30 and 8:30. What I'm going to try to do to break it off into a very simple, practical piece where I get you to connect, your program, your driver, create a driver, use classes, inheritance, that kind of thing, and polymorphism. Those things will be on the exam for sure, right? And to use pieces in the exam so that way, you're going to create something. But I'm going to give you a lot of the code, and all you need to do is kind of connect it to make it work. Now, that might sound like it's easy, but actually getting somebody else's code and understanding what the hell it does is a lot harder than making your own code, right? So it's going to be very short. There can't be a lot of requirements in the exam right now. So what I'm going to do is, of course, I'm going to make it so that it's fairly straightforward for you guys to get. Okay, so let's assume that next week, at the first part of our session together on the Tuesday at 10:30 is when our exam is going to happen. Okay, let's take a look at this. So again, I'm looking at the PowerPoint. Yours is in PDF version, and what we're talking about again is GUI. This is GUI components part 1. GUI components part 2 in the book is like thing, right? It's way up there. I'm not sure if we're going to get to it in this course. So again, we talked about what a GUI is, which is like this user interface. This is very basic stuff that you know about. One part that it's covered in the book that I'm not going to cover here, and I'm not going to ask you about. For example, let's talk about some stuff that's general for all GUIs, right? Or user interfaces. I like to call them a UI as opposed to GUI, right? Nowadays, it's UI and UX, right? User experience and user interface, right? So from a UI perspective, one thing that we can tell is that there's different parts of a UI. One of them is the title. And even if we run the current application the way we have it, so if I go into my files and I go into my program.java, and again, if you guys if you want to follow along, right, then you can go up on GitHub. I have my, in COMP228, lesson 6, there is all the files you need to kind of catch up with me, right? So if I press play here, if you notice I have this, this comes up, and I have, the title bar, which is empty right now, and I've got the actual frame itself. This is the actual frame. And let's go back to the PowerPoint. The menu bar, there's no menu bar in this one. And in the top right region for Windows, you got the set of buttons, and on the Mac, it's on the left. There she is. And inside the GUI components area, which is in here, is where we have all, right? So that's really it in a nutshell from a naming convention perspective. It's very simple. You've seen it before. So if I look at the actual UI that we created, we have a GUI component. We have our title bar that's empty right now with a control set of buttons here on the left for Mac, on the right for Windows, right? And this is our frame, the J frame right now, okay? Inside the J frame, as a default, we have a J panel, like we saw last time. We don't have to have all those things. We can program them. We can use it. We can do it programmatically or through the UI of the IDE drag and drop controls that we did earlier. Let me just close this off. Now, in the book, it talks about this idea of a Nimbus look and feel. I'm not to it too much. What it does is there's a setup that you can perform to kind of change the look and feel of your windows. So there's the to Nimbus. That's all it is. And there's a bit of code you have to put into your IDE for it to go. So I'm not going to test you on it. I'm going to ask you questions about the Nimbus look and feel. Right, but really what it does is it changes the way you do it. There's a couple of operating system changes, or even some changes to your application. And then once you make those changes, you have a different look and feel. It's almost like a steel look and feel to the UI. Really not as you can change it later on. So what we use here, and if you look at the example, I'm just going to make this a little larger so you can see the code. It says most application uses windows or dialog boxes, or they also call them dialogues, and then the JSON package java.swing provides pre-built dialog boxes for input and output. Now, sometimes we need these. They're like message boxes. Think of it that way. So remember how we have an alert box in JavaScript or some kind of message window? That's what the JOption pane does, right? So the JOption pane is just a way of alerting or creating an alert box that's pre-built for us. Instead of creating our window the way we have it right now. So when I come here and I click the kind of debugging, it brings up our predefined window. The JOption pane actually creates a predefined window that's built into Java. What that looks like. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to import this option pane into the Java, from the Java Swing package. We have to import this library here, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to define a couple things. We're going to say show input dialog. Here's enter the first integer, and JOption pane, which if you notice we're defining, show input dialog, enter the second. So we're going to do these two things in this JOption pane, and we're going to assign them to first number and second number as a, so there's two buttons that are going to pop up, right, to show this. Then we're going to do some multiplication or addition here, and then we're going to show another message that shows the answer. This is really rudimentary, and this is kind of ugly. But let's see what it does. So I'm going to kind of instantiate almost like a, with the JOption pane, a class. You can grab those people and let them in. So let's do that. So instead of doing this, we're just going to comment this piece out, just like we've never done it before, right? And let's use this JOption pane stuff. So we're going to say, we're going to define variables, right? So same thing, we're going to say capital S string, and the first string variable that we're going to define is first name, right? And we're also going to define a string that's last name. So first name, last name. And what I want to do is I want to use first name equals to, and here's JOption pane, right? Take a look at the PowerPoint. Where it says JOption pane dot show input dialog, right? And then some kind of input for my first name and last name. So let's, and this is kind of the poor way to do it. So again, if you notice, if I go show input dialog, it actually does that for me, right? Show input dialog. And what I want to do is it's asking me for a message that I'm going to add in, like please, or enter your first name. Enter your first name. Cool. If you notice, I didn't really have to do anything there. J option pane, show input dialog. I kind of pulled that up. And what it did was, if you notice, as soon as I started typing J option pane, it added this Java swing component, right, for J option pane in there, so it allows me to do it. I'm going to do a quick fix and add that J option pane in there manually. So let's see if we just do this one first name, what it does. If I just fire this up, right, and if I check the program, bam, I got this little input box with, you know, enter your first name. And if I enter it, like whatever I want, all of a sudden my program is running. Take a look down here, my program is still going, right? So I haven't told it what to do. Now it's finally killed. First, because J option pane is to pull in some data. That's all I'm doing with it. Think about it as a dialog box or some kind of input box that kind of flashes up the last. Let's do the same thing. We're going to add in another J option pane. And instead of first name, we use last name for that. So here's my first name, last name. And this is two different dialog boxes, right, that are going to come up. Let's try this out now. So we got first name and last name. And then just to make sure that it's running, I'm going to do a system.out.println, right? And I'm going to use, you know, kind of first name, and we're going to say, we'll kind of concatenate everything, which is plus first name, last name, and then plus last name. So that's where it's going to print out, right? And by the way, if I've typed it wrong, it says, give me an error, right? What's the error? It says first name cannot be resolved to a variable. Oh, did I just do something wrong? Oh yeah, the end. That'll be okay. So that's first name and last name, and let's see what it does now. So I'm expecting some kind of output later on when I run this thing. So it's just a way of getting inputs. Well, there's one dialog box. So here's my first name. I press OK, and there's my last name. My Tom, my last name's the output. So I actually get some input from my first name, last name. That's what it does. My application is still running. It's not good, right? Well, for it to die. So that's what it does. The basics. And if you notice, that's the option that's in the. So take a look at this other thing. It says joption.showMessage, show message dialog, which is different than show input dialog. So there's input dialog. Now, let me tell you this. Show message dialog is like, you know, kind of a message window or whatever. It's actually quite interesting for us to pull up almost like an alert box of what this does. Now take a look at what it has. It has a couple of options. First one is option is null. Then in this particular example, we're not going to print the sum. We're actually going to output it this way. And the sum of the two integers, and then some J option pane plain message is the last option. Right? So J option pane .show message dialog is what we want to use now. I mean, these are very basic functions. So instead of system, keep this format for a second. I'm going to use some of that stuff. I'm going to shrink this window a little bit so you can see more of this. So let's do that. So we'll say J option pane, and if I press Control space, it's going to give me an example of what to use. J option pane dot show, and if you notice, there's a bunch of different shows. They show confirm dialog, they show input dialog, they show internal confirm dialog, right? They show message dialog, and there's a bunch of constructors, right? There's and again, I'm showing you there's one that's showing its parent component. That's why it's null. And they're showing you different constructors here, the constructor signatures. So let's see if I can show you the constructor signatures that we can have on. So let's take a look. There's this one that has parent component and an object message. That's one signature. There's a parent component, which is null, and an object message, and a string title and a message type. There's a component, string title, message type, and an icon, right? That's pretty good. That's just quite a bit of flexibility here. So that's what I want to probably use this one. So I'm going to kind of click this one, and it gives me the stuff that it's asking for. When on components. So parent component, obviously there's none, so we're going to leave that as null. My message is going to be this, right? This whole line here. That's my message. Let's see what it does with it. So I'm going to kind of copy this one and put it here, right? And then my title is string. So I'm going to say, we're going to call this, you know, maybe profile info. That's my title. And my message type, and again, is there's different kinds of message types. And how do I, well, with stuff that's in our PowerPoint to figure it out, right? If we didn't know, it'd be JOption pane dot, and then some kind of enum, right? Typing J option pane, and probably in all in caps, option pane dot. And if you notice, there's a bunch of enums that come up. My message is the one we want to use, so I'll just double click on that. That's an enumeration, right? So that has a certain value. And then the icon, if the last one is an icon that I can use, and I'm probably going to say there's probably going to be another J option. Check that out. So say J option. I'm just guessing. And then if I try and pull that up, I want to try and use some kind of enumeration that I got to pull up, right? If I can't find it here, it's okay, because remember, the structure allows me to take it back. So an example of this would be, if I can't remember what the icon is, if I start typing icon and I press Control space, because I can't remember, you know, maybe it'll bring it up here as one of my things. Here's icon for my Java swing. I don't know what it is though, icon. So it might be icon dot something, dot, and no. Something like that though, some kind of fixed icon. So let's just erase that and use the original signature without the icon. All right, let's check this out and see what happens. So boom, boom, boom. It's going to ask me 2 questions. My first name, which is kind of poor, and my last name. My first name, last name, my profile info is my text, is my title, and my first name is Tom, and my last name is Tsiopoulos, and I have an OK button. When I press this, I also get my first name, last name in the console. So pretty straightforward stuff. Any questions around J option pane? And 2 options we've looked at, show message dialog. Very simple way of communicating in and out. Show message dialog, think about it this way. You're building an application and you don't want to just give a console, you want to get some pop-up for whatever. It's another place you can use some debugging, right? Typically, we don't want to show a message dialog unless there's some kind of message where we stop the user and say, man, there's an error. That's typically one. Or do you want to continue, or confirm, yes or no? Right, we want to use those kind of message dialogues. And it kind of, it's a modal window, which kind of interrupts the flow of our application. So when we put up a dialog box, like an alert box in JavaScript, right? It stops application flow. It's called modal, or mode. It's a moded type window. There's also modeless, right? Which means you can have another screen that pops up, but it doesn't stop you from moving around and clicking other places, right? This J option pane, let me show you what it does. If I do it again, and if I try clicking somewhere else, it'll do that, but my application is stopped until I do this. If I press cancel and cancel, I'm going to get null, null, right? I won't be able to get to the last one until I do the first 2. Okay. And again, if I had an origin, then this it would point back to a certain window. I can launch it from a window. It can be tied into a particular application. Right now, it's not tied to anything, right? So again, a good way of using input dialogues and message dialogues. In the book, right? And we're waiting for the enter. If you notice, if the user clicks cancel, turns not from message dialog perspective. Okay. Also, depending on what we enter, remember there's no control over the user's input, right? So the user can ask for a string. I'm good, right? Because it'll include everything. But if I ask for an integer or a float, I have to follow the same rules that we did before when we from the control over what the user is going to input, right? So I have to make sure that I do my exception handling, right, which is not what I want. Here are some defaults for the message dialog options that we looked at before. So there's an error message, an information message, a warning message, which is kind of cool. So an error message would be error, please enter the correct information, you know. And what we did is we said plain message, right? Now it comes with these different icons built in, but I can also assign an icon as an example instead. If I want, like, you know, as an example, I can always look at the API documentation for Java Swing. So if I want to say to Google it, so I say J option pane, right? And if I press enter, and I want to look at Java 7, SE7, it's the same as 8, I can see what I have an option to. So there's my object, my component, my icon, and it says the icon is displayed in the dialog. Here's my message type, error message, question, plain message, my option type, default option, yes or no option, yes, no, cancel. I'll actually put in an option type in there. And then there's a J button is created when I do an icon with this as the label, right? Icon is a decoration icon, right? To be placed in the dialog box, and a default value for this is determined by the message type parameter. So if I say my message type is error type, then I'm going to get a different icon than I would, but I can always specify something else. And they give some really good examples here up online, and show you what a dialog for a J option pane does, right? With some options. You go further down, it gives you more information about each of the fields and what they're expecting you to put in, like the OK option or the cancel option or whatever. I can ask for those two things. But how do I listen for different options? That's the question, and it's the same thing that we did when we used things on C#. You have to look for the different options that you're getting back, right? Because remember, the J option pane is returning something. Let me give you an example of that. If I go back to Java, when I do this message dialog piece, which is the piece I want to show you, right? Right now, it's going to return nothing because it's not return. I'm not catching what it's returning anywhere. But if you take a look, right? If I just go into the documentation here, right? And if I look through just by hovering over, right? It gives me all the documentation I just saw online. Okay? With all the stuff that I was looking for, instead of searching online, I just have to hover over it in Eclipse. I don't know if you saw that. So here, I'm just hovering over this thing. So can I make it assign, just like I assigned my J option pane here, and I assigned the output of whatever I asked for, the input dialog, I assigned it to a variable name. Can I assign this to something else so I can see what the output is? Let's check it out. So I want to see what my message return is. So I'm going to make a new string. I'm going to call this message return. And my message return is going to be equal, let's see if this works, message return is equal to this. Error, and if you notice there's a quick fix that comes up, there's an error that comes up that says, whoa, type mismatch, cannot convert void to string. So you notice that right now this show message nothing, as is. One more thing that I want to show you here. So we've got this. I'm trying to maximize the screen here for a second. Let's right, but make it a little bit more simpler. So let's get rid of this and go to J option pane. Dialog. And let's look at another constructor, another option here. So I've got, again, my option, my object message, right? My message type. I'm not going to choose icon. The other one is here's the other one. The internal And here's my message type. My message type. So one thing I've changed is my message type. But what if I went to, instead of show message dialog, I want to do the confirm message. So I want to say confirm. Here's my show confirm dialog. That's a different thing, right? Actually gives me an option type, right? An option type. And then a message type. And an icon if I want it. Let's do this one. Okay, so my parent component is null for my confirm dialog, right? And my message is going to be, kind of an error, right? Let's make it an error. So error, input, incorrect input, something like that. And then the title will be error. Make an error box, right? And now here's the option type. I've got another thing here that shows option type and message type. My JOption pane message type, I know it's the same one, right? So at JOption pane dot, and then if you notice my my type is I want to make an error message. There it is. There's error message. That's one thing that'll work. But I can also use the type, which is here. And I do JOption pane. Right, dot, and I can do different options. Might do a closed option, a default option, no option, or an OK option, OK cancel option, right? So let's, an OK cancel option, see what happens, because that means that I would get two buttons, OK and cancel. Before I just got OK. Now, this could be more like, do you want to continue, yes or no? Right, I need a semicolon. All right, so now that I've got that, let's see what it does on the second run. So I'm going to I don't need to see this part, so we're not going to ask first name and last name. I'll keep them there just so we can see the difference. And I'm just going to run this JOption pane show confirm dialog, which is different than the other ones. And this is something we use a lot too. Okay, error, it says, right? Incorrect input. Okay, and then I'm done, and it'll close it off in a second, right? Well, what does it return? Let's go use my message return type again now. Does it return anything? Over it for JOption pane show confirm dialog, this piece, it says that it returns an integer, right? That's what it returns. That's the return type. Integer indicating the option selected by the user. So about this now. If I've got two options, cancel or OK, right? What is the, and can I use it to a string? Can I do that? Like this. So message return is equal to, of course it can. If I hover over this thing, it says I can change this to an int. Let's do that. Let's do the quick fix. And now we'll have an integer. Let's print out, let's send that into the console. So system.out.println to the console. Let's see what kind of message we get when we press cancel or OK. Okay. Let's press go ahead. So I run it. I press cancel and I get a 2. Now you'd be forgiven to think that it'd be like sense, right? Let's try that again. So run it again, press OK, I get a 0. How come it's a 2? I mean, I'm only seeing a 0 or a 2. Why not a 1, right? Let's change the OK cancel option. Other options we can get here. This is really valuable because if you want to create some kind of input, let's choose the default option. So there's a default option there as well. What does that give us? So I'm going to kind of press play. Default option says OK, right? It says OK, I get a 0. And it's just an OK button, right? So if I just want the default option, just OK, thank you very much, let's continue. I'm going to get a 0 back, right? Every time. Okay, let's do the other one. So here's how about the cancel option. So I did OK cancel. Let's just do cancel. Let's see what I get back now. So okay, cancel. I press, oh, I get okay, cancel again, right? So I press cancel, I get a 2. And when I press OK, I get a 0, right? So cancel option and OK cancel are the same, right? Again, you'll be tested on this one, going through in detail for you. So what about this yes, no, cancel option? There's one, yes, no, cancel option, right? And again, I'm choosing this enumeration that's built into JOptionPane, right? I'm not making this up. It's just part of the API. So I'm going to run this now and see what I get. Yes, no, cancel, right? So I'm going to press yes, it's a 0. I press no, it's a 1. That's interesting. And when I go cancel, it's a 2. So it goes from the right to the left, and yet when it was a 0 or 2. If we had 3, it's a 0, 1, or 2, right? So you need to know what you're listening for. So if I was to say if the user enters cancel, right? What am I really asking for? Cancel then, because it's yes, no, cancel. Cancel would be a 2, right? So if I get a 2, and if I do a switch statement, and if I switch a 2, then he's canceling, and I want to shut down. If he wants to continue, he presses a yes. That's going to be a 0, right? So 0 means I want to continue, so I can shut this option pane down and move on, right? If I get a 1, right? No, I want to get a no, so I don't want to continue, right? But I don't want to cancel out either, right?
So it just hides.
Yeah, that's all it does, right? So I mean, it's there. So those are the options for JOptionPane. Again, we've looked at 3 different ways: a show input dialog, show message dialog, and a show confirm dialog. What if? I want to build my own, right? Can I build my own show option pane, right? My own option pane, my own. I mean, I kind of did it earlier, right? But maybe I could build my own too, without knowing anything, if it's even possible, right? About building your own JOptionPane, object. Any ideas? New class. Let's try this out. So if we can do it. So I'm going to go right-click on my default package. I'm going to go New Class. And in this particular, let's do one more thing. I'm going to cancel out this for a second. How about over here? I got my swing, right? And I see there's a bunch of different options there. I've got a JFrame dialog. JDialog. Maybe that's what I want to make, right? Instead of a JOptionPane and then make a class, make a JDialog. That might be the thing to do. So that's kind of like, looks like it's not a panel and it's not a frame. So most likely this one might be the best way to do it, right? Instead of wasting time. So let's try this one. So JDialog. All right, so we're going to call this, it's going to be part of the JDialog class. We're going to make this without knowing anything. We're just going to use dialog. That's what my class is going to be called. Or we're going to make it, sorry, capital M dialog. And our best practice tells us we need to make capitals for a class, right? And then we're going to use finish. All right, so now we get a stub of a class with a static method, right, like we did before. That's what this thing does. And I can also design it. So if I go back to my designer, right, it parses it, and I have a drag and drop form, right, where I can add in whatever I want in here. Okay, this is good. Let's go back to source for a second, right? Here's something, JDialog dispose on close. That's what it does for my close operation, right? And my set visible to true. But I have this as part of my object that I want to kind of remove this piece. Remember I did this last time. And I want to put this stuff when I declare a dialog as an extension of JDialog, which is the JDialog class, right? I also have something else. I've created a JPanel calling content panel, which is a private final object. Remember, final, it means what? Static, constant, right? So So let's go back to when we do content panel. Instead of that, just to go with our convention, I'm going to refactor rename this one. Just if we're going to keep this refactor rename, and we're going to call this content panel underscore content panel. There we go. And if you notice, there's quite a bit of other options here that we're going to get into without knowing what any of this stuff does, right? Again, we're just kind of playing around. One thing I do want to do is I want to make it so that we use the this keyword. If I was going to refactor my stuff, I would definitely use the this keyword to go in here. And my dialog is the constructor for the dialog, my dialog class, right? So let's change this piece to show constructor again. Okay. Just and now we're setting up all this stuff, which I probably want to do in my negative before. So I'm going to kind of highlight everything. And if you know, if you want to see where this is all at, this is that. And I think this might be it. You see? Yep. So anything that's in here, I want to highlight all this stuff, not including the last two curly braces, right? And I want to go refactor. So we just view refactor rename or extract method, which we're going to call, it's going to be a private method, but we're going to call underscore initialize. This is initialize method, and press OK. There it is. So this is my initialize method now that this is being called. It's a private method, right? And we call it a constructor. So when we call it constructor, we initialize the dialog. Make sense? Here's our cancel button, and we have a set action command, cancel. And we have the OK button, which we're actually setting up the OK button is a type of J button. It's a J button object, right? Which we're instantiating a new J button object that's local to this one, right? Where we're setting up a set action. And this set action command is basically saying that treat this button as an OK button. So when you press this, it's going to give you a 1 or a 0, same as we got before, right? Button pane, we're going to add an OK button, the OK button to our button pane, because each object is going to be inside of a container. And what we're going to get the root pane and set the default button as the OK button. So this button, the OK button. We're also going to use a border layout, and it's going to be south, which is going to be the bottom of our border, right? And we're also got an embed where we're going to put it to the right, the whole J panel. So some stuff we haven't seen before, but more or less, if you actually were to try and read this thing, break these ones out. But I'm going to leave these anonymous objects here instead of making them themselves, just from a time perspective. We don't have time, but you could always split them separate. All right, this is where we have to get rid of this. We do see this dialog set visibility to true. We still see this as a requirement of our dialog. So we want to show our dialog, then we got to set our visibility to true, right? And we also have to set the default close operation to dispose on close. So when we click OK, it's going to or cancel, it's going to close down. So we need to take this and remove it from here. So let's do that. So let's go back to my program, and we'll just kind of hide this stuff, and we'll hide this stuff for now. Leave it in there. We'll leave some of these to use them later on. And just scroll down here, and we're going to do this new my dialog. Kind of save this thing here, and we're going to say, well, my dialog is equal to a new my dialog. And that's kind of simple. We have to instantiate the object first. The second thing we have to do is my dialog dot, and then if you notice, there's a bunch of different options. It knows what to do. I can add something to the dialog, to the box or whatever. But what I need to do is this option right here, which is set default close operation. Dialog, which is my dialog, dot set default close operation. I need to do this. So I'm going to take this piece, go back over here, and paste. And the other one I need to do is my set visible is true. I'll put that into this as well. So I'm going to say my dialog dot, and let's just type it in, set visible to true. We're going to launch this dialog box from my driver class, the program program file. Okay. Okay, cool. Let's take out that static class because we don't need it anymore. The static main method, we don't need this anymore, so we're going to remove it, right? Because that makes no sense for us to have this whole piece in. We're not using the try catch block, which might get us into trouble, but it's okay. We'll get rid of all this. All right, so now all we have is the looking class, right? We have our JDialog, our dialog class. And we also have our constructor. We've kind of created this constructor out here, where we have inside of our dialog, to run this thing, going back to the program file and run it, it will launch our custom dialog. There it is. So that's our custom dialog we can create. And if you notice, right now, the options allow us for me to resize the box and so on. I can stop that from happening. I don't want to resize this option up and down. I can stop resize. And if I click OK, right now it doesn't do anything when I click OK or cancel because I haven't programmed those buttons in. But if I click the little X on the top, it'll shut down my program. Dispose on close. So that's our custom dialog. Now we haven't talked about putting stuff in our custom dialog. If I click design, notice how on the left we have our components in their order. They are in hierarchical order, right? On the right, we have information just like we did before. I just want to show you this again, where we have our content panel. Here's my dialog, and there's my initialized private function, or method, if you will, right? Okay, so I want to add something in when I, when I pull up this dialog, I want to control, as an example, this size. So let's open this up. You notice my background, my default is hide on close, right? Enable is equal to true. I can also disable it, right? I can change my default font. Right now it's Lucida or Lucida Grande 13, right? My foreground, I can change my foreground icon image. I can make it modal or non-modal. Modal means you have to do something with it or you can't continue. Remember I talked about modal or non-modal? Let's make it modal is true. So I'm going to click modal as true. So we're going to make it just like a regular dialog box, right? I'm changing everything here in my options as opposed to doing it in code, right? So let's see how much stuff I can do here and how it's going to affect the rest of my code here. So modal, it says no exclude. Modality is modeless. I can choose document modal, application modal, right? So what kind of mode is it going to have? Let's leave it as modeless for now. Well, actually, it doesn't make sense. If I make it modal and I make it modeless, it kind of cancels each other out. Let's make it application modal. All right. My opacity is 1, means it's 100% opaque. If I want to make it so you can see through it, let's change my opacity, to 0.8 a little bit. And my tab order, I don't have any tabs. I don't have a title. Let's add a title. So my title is going to be, my dialog. So my dialog, right? My type is normal, right? Look how it appeared. My dialog. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to. I don't want to have any. So that's not right. My normal utility or pop-up. Let's make it normal, right? I think that's enough changes. Let's see what happens when I go back to code view, right? So I'm going to go back to code view, and now I see that there's a few more changes. I set my title, to my dialog. I set my opacity to 0.8. I set my modality type to application modal. I set modal to true, and then I hit initialize. Well, I don't want this to happen in my constructor. I want this to happen in my in here, right? So grab this, put it in here, right, as an example, and let's see if that does anything. Also, my bounds. When I set bounds, what other options do I have for set bounds? If I'm just going to do that again, if I say set bounds and I open it up, do I have some kind of other? And I do. If you notice, set bounds X, Y, width, and height. And I also have my rectangle. That's one thing. What about if I want to make it so that my window for my dialog is you can't do anything with it. You can't resize it. How do I do that? You'd have to look at the API documentation for that. Let's check this out. Let's run this thing. Whoa, oh wait, sorry. Okay, so we got a bit of an issue, right? It says a legal operation in main. It says the dialog is decorated, right? My set opacity is happening, and I'm doing that before I do the other things, right? Let me show you why it's that, because that's what I would have done anyway. I put it like this, right? I set bounds, I get the content, I do all this kind of stuff. Well, I need to set all this up before I do set title and blah, 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 right? I can't do it before set the title and set modal and modality and everything else. I need to do it after I instantiate my border layout, my flow layout, all this kind of stuff. My buttons too much. Like this is all my buttons. I don't care about this piece. But after I got to do all this, chances are after everything else. Let me just cut this out and put it here and see if that makes any difference. I'm going to go back to here and press play. Nope. Could be my modality. It says dialog is decorated, right? If I click on this to see what it does for my thread, how do I find out what this this problem is? Problem here that I have 19 warnings and I got some errors. Well, I don't have any errors anymore. I could debug. I could put in some stuff. I can actually add a breakpoint in and step through all that kind of stuff to see what happens. I could do that from a time perspective. The easiest way to do that is start commenting, right? So I'm gonna seriously. So let's take out opacity. Seems to be one of the issues. So let's just take this out. Modality is the other issue. Let's take that out. And set modal to true is, let's take this out for a second. But let's leave the title as my dialog. So that's the first thing we've kind of changed. Let's try this out and then go back and press play. We got my dialog, right? So title is okay. Let's try adding the next one, which is a little faster than doing debugging, right? So let's add, so see if my opacity crashes me, right? Because I'm making an opacity of 0.8, right? Run this thing, bam, I get the error. So that seems to crash my system opacity piece of 0.8f, right? There could be different reasons for that because maybe I haven't set up a way of supporting that yet, right? Again, we're running blind. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to modality. Let's see if modality and modal true is going to crash with these two options. They're kind of related, right? Oh, that's pretty good, right? So if I want to click away, I'm good. But I can't do anything with this. If this was running from another app, this would be modal. Okay, so that kind of works. The opacity piece doesn't work. So I'm going to kind of get rid of it. And there might be a reason for that because of the way we've done our dialogue. Questions so far on this dialogue, JDialog, which is like kind of like, and again, I can put in some custom icons by dragging. Let's go to design and see if I'm good with the design. I can still drag and drop some stuff in here, just like normal, just like a regular container, right, or regular window. And again, what I would do is, I mean, if I want to go to menu and I want to add in a menu bar, I can put in a menu bar. We're going to try that later on. I can definitely add in things like labels, in the middle. So if I go click on J label, see how this is, it's kind of showing me where this is going, right? Remember, in order for me to drag and drop necessarily, I'm clicking here once and then clicking over here. But notice that there's no container from my dialog, right? I've got my button pane, which is down here. But up here I'm okay, right? But once I go up to the top, I can't do it that way, right? What about here in my content pane? Can I just drag it here? There's different options, right? I can drag it to my picture or I can drag it to my hierarchy. So let's try dragging it to my content panel. So put it in there. My new label, which I can name and all that kind of stuff and say something like, it's whatever message, error message, error. That's my error. It's my custom error box, right? And I've added in a label that's anonymous. I change, and if you notice, it changed automatically to label error. It's taking the name, the string name, and I'm making it original. That's what it's trying to do. right? If you notice error, I can go in here and change the text. I can also add tooltip text, where if I hover over this error, it'll show me what it is. So let's try this out. So I'll say error to describe what tooltip text is, right? And then when I go back to source, you see that it's added a couple of additional things here. So here's my initialize method. Down in here, inside my content pane now, notice how I'm adding in another JLabel, something new, which is called label error. And it's adding in the label in here, and it's assigning it because I don't have any kind of top, right, left, any kind of border or layout. It's just going to put it right in the middle. Let's see what happens when we launch this thing, if it causes an error now. So on this thing, and then when it launches, I get this error, and if I hover over, I get this tooltip, right? When I hover over, that's built in. So I added tooltip text. All right, so slowly, we're getting there. Checking different options out, right? Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So we talked about the J option pane and JLabel, J dialog. And what I'm going to do now is just because we've done a bunch of things, I'm going to update GitHub just so we can kind of be on the same page if you want to try some of those things out. And again, we're still exploring. We're in that stage. We're exploring the UI components, right? We haven't made anything useful yet, which we will have to do at some point. Can't just keep exploring, right? All right, so let's do this thing. So I'm going to right-click on team. I'm going to go to commit, and of course, I've added a my dialog option, which is this is the thing I've added in, and I've updated my program as a result. So I'm going to say added some J dialog class, right? Called my dialog, and I'll commit and push. And now you guys have that up online. If you want to follow along with what I've done, you can certainly do that by looking up on GitHub, right? And you can see some of this stuff here. Okay, just want to make sure I hit as much as I can. So again, this is these are the other Swing components we're going to be talking about. There's two different tool sets that we automatically get to use in Java the old way, right? One is Swing UI components, located in javax.swing, right? And the other one is the abstract window toolkit, and these are low-level tools we can use for UI components, right? Which is part of the AWT package, right? Those are the two components. So here's some of the ones we've seen so far: JLabel, a JText field, a JButton, JCheckbox, a JList, and a JPanel. And if you notice, a JPanel is what we use to put in some content. That's what that holds our content right now. And it says an area which components can be placed and organized in a JPanel. So we have a JFrame, right? Well, we have a JPanel where everything sits inside. The JFrame is actually this screen. Here's the hierarchy of how it looks, right? So we say we have an object, we have a component, because remember, everything comes from the component or object superclass. So our object superclass, the component is the subclass. Subclass of that is the container, and a subclass of container is the J component, whatever the J component is, whether it's a JFrame or a JPanel, whatever. It's another component. So two things to note for the exam when I ask you these questions. Swing components are not tied to actual UI components of the underlying platform. These things are known as lightweight components. So Swing components, lightweight. If I use AWT components, right, the abstract Windows kind of components or whatever, those are locally called, or averagely, they're called heavyweight components because accessing the windowing system. Well, on the Mac, it's accessing the operating system Windows system, right? That's what it's doing. And there are some Swing components that also act as heavyweight components. So again, lightweight or heavyweight. Actually, the way you should think about it is low level. An easier way to say it. They just call it heavyweight and lightweight. So class component is the superclass of all the UI components in Swing. Okay, so again, subclass of container, and JComponent itself is the superclass of all the lightweight swing components, and they're also called containers, right? All container type classes. All right, so common lightweight component features, right? Supported by JComponent, so a pluggable look and feel. They all look very similar. There's some shortcut keys for each of the components, which is cool, right? Common event handling capabilities, tooltips, which we just already saw, support for accessibility for those people with accessibility issues, and also localization. What's localization? You guys actually have it on the Microsoft site too. Language, but also locale, like actually culture is what it's called in Microsoft. So what happens is, let's say, for example, you're in Russia, right? And you have you're using a Russian application that's built in Java, right? Well, let me take that back. You have an application that's been built, but you're in Russia. The application should be smart enough to change up all the labels for the buttons as well as the label components, right? And everywhere else in the file so that it's using Russian, right? With the same functionality, different language. That's localization, right? So your way the look and feel according to the culture or the language that you're sitting inside. So it makes it more. It can kind of pass on. We're passing the application from from one machine to the next, and it's not localized just to English, as an example. Okay, something we already know, which we've already seen, right? Most windows that can contain swing they're all instances of something called, which class of, there you go, this heavyweight component called window, right? So the heavyweight component, indirect class. What's an indirect class again? Remember, we talked about direct classes and indirect classes. What's the direct class of JFrame, do you think? Probably component, JComponent, my guess, right? So if JComponent is the direct class, the indirect component would be the window you're going to get through the AWT, which is the system that's low level. That's a low level or heavyweight system that we're getting, right? So two things to provide. It's maximize and close, which we've already seen, right? On the Mac, it's on the left side. On the Windows, it's on the right side. Those kind of things. And examples here, and they're going to have these concepts. So labels, as an example, UI component. It's also part of the JComponent subclass, right? But it's definitely a place where you can have text that spits out, which we've seen before. So labels and buttons. Those are the main things we use everywhere in components. Let's give an example of that in code without using a drag and droppable interface like we've done already. Take a look at what we've got here. In the book, they show you that we have a heavyweight component called flow layout, which specifies, like it says, how components are arranged in our flow layout. We haven't talked about layouts yet. We have a JFrame, which is our basic window, a label, some swing constants, which we got to figure out what those are, right? An icon, looking for it, right? And some kind of image icon, right? And these are all things that we're importing. We have them as a label frame. Here's a label frame, which extends a JFrame. So basically, this is our custom window that we've created. Excuse me. In our constructor, in the constructor of this object, right? We're actually sending through into the superclass of we're sending through testing JLabel. And why? Because we can send in the value of our title bar right into the constructor, right, of the superclass. And we're going to set the layout as a new flow layout, all right? That's what it's going to do. A flow layout is a different kind of layout that we've been using. We're using a border layout so far, right? Now, again, this is happening programmatically. There's no drag and drop here, right? So a different kind of JFrame than we've seen so far. Now we're creating a new label. Again, there's 3 labels we've defined, right? The first label, we're assigning a label, and we're saying label with text. And we're also setting the tooltip text, which we've already seen, just to support that. And we're using the add method to add the label to the JFrame. Think about our JFrame as our main component, and we're adding this label directly to the component inside of flow layout. So far, there isn't a J panel. It's just directly adding it into the frame. Okay? This is a different effect than what we've done so far. Let's finish off this little thing. So here's an icon. They've defined an icon by using the get resource method, right, to get an icon that's inside of their assets, right? They're using the get, and they're defining it as a new anonymous image icon, right? What they're doing. This is like, I may not do it this way myself, but it's the book. And what they're doing with the book is they're trying to condense the amount of code that's in here. This is a very common way of doing it, by the way. So we're getting an icon as bug. It's type of icon, right? And that's why in the top here, we're seeing that the swing is importing the icon class, right? So we can do that. They call it bug. Bug is the object, right? And we're using this image icon get class.get resource method to access the asset, which is bug1.ping, the PNG file that should exist somewhere inside of our assets. Our second label is another J label that not only puts the text in there, but actually uses the bug image that we're going to get, plus we use swing constants to move it to the left. This is a line left is what this does, right? And then, of course, we assign the tooltip, and then we add it to the JFrame with the add function, right? Now, label 3 is a new J label. We add some other stuff. We set the icon to a bug. That's another way to do it. Instead of doing it this way, right, where we say J label and then bug as an icon, we can do it separately. That's what they're showing you here. So set text. Instead of doing it this way and instead of sending it into the constructor, we have some built-in getters and setters that we in our label object, right? So we can set text, we can set icon, we can set horizontal text position, we can set vertical text position, we can set tooltip text, that in to our JFrame. Okay, let's check this out really quickly. We already have an example of this. If we go back to Eclipse, I'm going to close off my dialog.java and go back into my example frame, which is what we're using right now. And if you notice, in this particular case, what we're doing is we're using it as a, let's just convert it. We're going to convert this one to the same kind without using a J panel, right? So right now, our example frame uses a J panel as a content panel, right? We're going to get rid of it, right? So let's try this out. Oop. And we're not going to use a border layout or an empty border. We're definitely going to, kind of describe a J label, which we've already kind of got in there, our first name label. We get rid of these two things, right? Now when we do that, there's some errors, right? Because there is none of this, so we're going to get rid of those, right? In our initialize function. And the set default close operation, we're going to keep. Set bounds, we're going to keep. This is for the frame itself. And content panel and all this kind of stuff, and set content pane, you notice all that has to go because we don't need any of that stuff. This frame name, first name label, we're going to keep. And where it says this.content panel add, we're just going to say this.add because we're going to the frame. And we don't have a border layout of north. We don't have that, right? Because we don't have a border layout right now in our updated class. Back to the PowerPoint. If you notice, what we do here from a setup perspective is we set the layout to new flow layout, right? And we also send in a in the super class, we assign the title bar text right here. So let's do that. So here's my example. I'm going to call the super, and I'm going to set in there, my example frame. So example frame as my. And if you notice, then we're going to initialize, right? Now, I didn't have to do it there, but usually the super class, remember, by convention, you cannot do anything before you do the super class call, right? Now, the reason why I didn't have to call super is because if I have an empty constructor, right, there's different constructors. The super class can take nothing, right? It doesn't have to take, there is an empty constructor for the super class JFrame thing in there, right? You can set them later, set title bar text and all that kind of stuff, right? So the same thing goes with this. So that's the first thing. Now we have So in our layout, I want to do that here, right? When we set our bounds, I want to set my layout. So let's just do that here. So layout, and then if I press Control Space, right, I can choose the layout manager type. So I'm kind of what is expecting a layout manager, which is going to be a new flow layout. A new flow, and if I press flow layout is what it's going to ask me to put in. An anonymous layout manager that we're using. So now we've taken care of our layout. Before we were using a border layout. We didn't use the set layout method. By the way, because these are sets, set bound, set layout, you could always use this, right? Because the this keyword for this class, because this class is a JFrame, you could certainly use the this keyword because these set default, close operations, set bounds, and set layout are the default methods that come with the JFrame class, right? So that all we're doing is we're utilizing these classes, and so therefore you can use this keyword, which makes sense. I like it. I like using the this. It's very explicit. We know what it means, right? It's part of our class. But these are public methods that come with our superclass, or protected methods, actually. Okay, so that's one thing. The next one is, so we've taken care of these we've taken care of our label. We've added it to the, in here. Now I want to set the position of my label because I don't want to set my image yet, but I want to definitely set my position. So if you notice here, it says that I can, when I define my label, I define it as swing constants left. I can do that, right? So when I say a new J label, I have some options for how I create that thing. Let's look at the options for my J label. By the way, here's something interesting. I can make my own custom label by extending the J label class, right? Where it would take additional information, not just my J label. It can ask for other things like position, like absolute positioning. I can ask for whatever my own classes. I can extend the UI components that are built in here to make my own components, right? Well, let's keep the components the way they are for now. So JLabel, let's go back clips, and notice that I've added in JLabel, but there's other options. Let's just, instead of JLabel first name, I can kind of put Control Space. There's some other options, some other constructors for JLabel. I can ask for an icon, a string, an icon image, and some horizontal alignment, a string, the text, and horizontal alignment, which I like. I like these two things. String, text, icon, and then horizontal alignment. Just an icon image and some other stuff. So I like this horizontal alignment idea, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to say my string text, which is first name. That's what I want to put in there. And my alignment type. Now, remember how I did it before. It's, if you want to look in, which is swing constants dot and something, right? So I'm going to start typing swing, Control Space. Control Space gives me my coding thing, swing constants, right? Dot, and then where do I want to put it? Bottom, left, horizontal, leading, left, where I want it, right? Let's make it left, right? And let's see what it does now. So it shouldn't do much of anything different than we've seen before. I've added this thing in my border layout because that makes no sense. I don't have a border layout. I just want to add my first name label, right? Okay, cool. So I've got a very simplified version. Hey, here's a question now. We did this one by hand and we killed my J panel. Do I still have access to the design view? Remember, I killed a bunch of stuff. Let's click my design view and say if I've got, right? And this is a preview of what it's going to look like. So this first name, but hey, wait a minute, I said left. How come it's here? Well, what does this mean anyway, left? Well, my horizontal alignment is left, but my horizontal alignment where? Well, within my label. Take a look. I can resize my label by pulling much. So what if I do one of these? If I kind of start resizing it, can I resize my label? Like actually resize it? Right. Horizontal alignment do they speak of anyway? Right, that's the first thing to understand, right? my foreground. What about if I change my horizontal alignment to right? Doesn't do anything, right? Why? Because I don't have any kind of layout whatsoever right now, right? How about other options? My horizontal alignment is okay. I can certainly specify that. Let's keep it to the left. Icon, but if I click here, it's going to say, hey, well, there's a default image. My class resource, don't forget to refresh my project before. Absolute them. I don't want that for quick testing. Never use in real applications, or no image, right? So I can definitely choose an image, a default image, or some kind of class path. And look at what I've got here. I've got my resources.jar, right? And right now, I here that allows me to click an image, add it in. I don't have something like that. There's nothing that shows my default package in here, even this one, right? So we're going to put an icon in here, right, as an example, if I wanted to. Okay, here's my vertical alignment. My vertical alignment is center. My horizontal alignment is left. Maybe what I really meant is this is center, and my vertical alignment is top, center. What about it? Well, that doesn't kind of do anything. Let's leave it as center as well for now. So center doesn't mean anything. And now that I've saved this thing, go back to source. I made some changes. Where does it make those changes? It makes them in here, right? Swing constant center, right? If you notice that added that in and set it here in the code. So we can still work with the code and the design view as long as, and here's where my proviso comes in. A, you've kicked off this JFrame from the drag and droppable tools, the window builder, right? Class, right? If you just make it so it's not a part of a class, it'll fail. And if there's any error in here, it won't allow you to design. Okay, just letting you know. My border layout looks like it's useless. And here's something. I can always go right-click, right? And if I want to kind of remove. What if I want to remove or clean up my, my stuff, right? Like for example, is it refactor or imports? I want to kind of clean up my imports. How do I do that? So if I go clean up and do finish to see what it does. And what it does when I do clean up is it removes any unused imports from my file. Because sometimes I just had all these other imports in here. I don't need to, and then make the application a little heavier when I leave the imports on. Okay, now you wouldn't notice because the application is so stupidly small right now, so it doesn't matter, right? But in real life, you want to kind of remove any imports you don't need. Okay, so that's kind of cool what we've done there. For example, and then we'll stop. Actually, you know what? It's kind of more than halfway. Let's take a short break, 10 minutes, get some water into us. Go to a washroom break and come back for the rest.